Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me this afternoon. You might know there's been a fair few law updates, rejected proposals, and updates to the visa catalogue for France in recent years. So you're not alone if you're feeling confused and aren't sure where to start. If that sounds like you, then you've come to the right place. My name is Rosie, and I'm the Senior Copywriter at Your Overseas Home, and I'll be your host for this webinar session. I'm delighted to introduce you to our guest speaker today, Fabien Pellissier from Fab French Insurance, who will be revealing his top 10 tips for a successful long-term visa application in France. We'll also be touching on things that you need to consider before you apply. Before I do hand over to Fabien, I'd like to let you know that this webinar will largely follow a Q&A format, and we'll open up the floor to questions after Fabien has shared his top tips. Should you have any questions as we go along, feel free to type them into the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen, and I can ask Fabien on your behalf at the end. So before we get started, Fabien, please can you introduce yourself and Fab French Insurance?
Well, sure, and thanks for the actually pronouncing my name properly, because I know it's a challenge to say French names in English. So
yes,
congrats, you nailed it. But also, I'm happy that people call me Fab. I think it's easier usually, but yeah. So, basically, I'm Fabien. So I'm the founder and managing director of Fab French Insurance and also Fab Expat Services. So basically, we've been doing that since 2015, helping the English speaking people moving or relocating to France. So whatever with visas, residency permits, driver license exchange, all the way through insurance, which obviously is the sexiest topic that everyone wants to be talking about. But no, it's also one of the requirements usually for visas. And we've seen thousands of visas over the years. Actually, each year we see almost 1,000 visa applications through our services. So that's why we're here to help and explain the pitfalls that can be avoided.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. I will let you go into your first tip.
Yep. So timing.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you questions around each tip, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the basics. How should we plan out applying for a long-term visa, and what are the options if you're in a rush to obtain a visa as quickly as possible?
Okay. So timing the visa. So first, I think it's important to know that for non-Europeans, there are some exceptions, but that's like usually it always starts with a visa. Okay, that's the first step. And a visa is something you have to apply for from abroad, from a French perspective. Okay, so for example, if you're in the UK, you have to apply for a visa in the UK. The timing for that application, you can start a visa application process up to 6 months in advance on the official French visa website, which is called francevisa.gov.fr. And that application, but you can only book an appointment because that application process involves an in-person interview. Okay. Which is more like reviewing your file. Don't be scared about that. It's not like an interview with a lab and line of questioning. So that interview can only be booked when you're within 90 days of the intended arrival date. And if you're less than 30 days ahead from that date, then it's too late. So although you can start the process 6 months ahead, and I would actually strongly suggest you do start 6 months ahead, because you also need time to gather documentation and paperwork, and sometimes, schedule your move with an accommodation, rental address, whatever. But basically, the ideal visa application window is 90 to 30 days prior to the intended arrival date in France. I think it answers the question, doesn't it?
Yeah. Thank you. And how long does the application process typically take from start to finish?
So, that varies massively depending on where you're applying from and how busy they are, because this is also a seasonal thing. Obviously, there's always the amount of workers working wherever you'll be applying is kind of constant. But when this is kind of a season, like these days, April is the beginning, like May, June, July, and in July, August, they may also have some yearly take a day off, or actually weeks off, so they may be understaffed as well. So the usual process varies, and also varies if you are near to the consulate, because if you're applying in the UK or the US, they've subcontracted the process to a private company, TLS in the UK, VFS in the US. If, for example, let's focus on the UK. If you are in the UK and applying at London, the French consulate also is in London, so that would be a bit faster. If you're applying in Manchester, they'll have to ship your file to London. The consulate will then review the file, accept or refuse it, and then send it back to Manchester. So obviously you're adding postal delays. So all that being said, on average, you're looking at a couple of weeks delay. In theory, cannot exceed a month. But we've seen turnover of like as quickly as 4 days, and sometimes even less than that. For example, in January, I was surprisingly fast. We've seen less than 4 days actually applications. So whatever you're in a rush or not doesn't change anything, though. Unfortunately, they process all the files and all the applications the same. There is no such thing as an emergency visa in a way, although you can apply for some options at the visa center, but an application is an application. And that's why if you're less than 30 days ahead of the intended arrival date, you'll need to postpone the date. However, you do have a 90 days allowance, so that doesn't prevent you from coming to France. So.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you. I can see we've got a lot of questions coming in. So do hold on. We will be covering a lot, so we might answer your question as we go along. I've already seen a couple on this topic. So if let's say my partner has an Irish or an EU passport, do I need a visa to join them when moving to France?
Okay, so actually this is a very, very frequent situation and questions. And actually, I think since Brexit, the population of Ireland probably doubled or something. So, yeah, so technically speaking, it's actually a very good thing. So let's say if one, actually, well, we're talking Irish, but let's say if one partner is European or has an EU passport, so Irish or another actually country, then you can apply, you can skip the visa process. This is a very good thing, and apply straight away for a residency permit, which probably will be a multi-use permit on top of that. But whatever the permit, actually, you can apply for a permit straight away. What we call a residency permit also is a carte de séjour. And so that would be a residency permit as the spouse of an EU citizen. Can also be a residency permit as the spouse of a French citizen. But France being France, it's actually better if you just the spouse of an EU citizen rather than the spouse of a French citizen, because spouse of a French citizen, you'll have to go through a language test, whereas it's not mandatory for the spouse of an EU citizen. But that's it. And so you can apply for this straight away. You do need to apply within 90 days, though. So the clock is ticking. You need to apply within 90 days and get your residency permit, I would say, fairly quickly if you're the spouse of a... I'm saying spouse, by the way, it could also be the partner. You need to have some sort of a legal union, though. If you're just dating, unfortunately, it doesn't work. But if you have a civil partnership, marriage, well, any kind of formal union would work. But dating, sorry, guys, you'll have to make a bit more of a commitment.
Okay, fabulous. Let's move on to number 2. Okay, so make sure you apply for the correct visa. I know there's a lot of confusion around the long stay visa and a temporary long stay visa. What's the difference?
Okay, so again, this is France. If it's not confusing, that wouldn't be funny. So we need to spice up the game a bit. So the 6-month visa. There are many more, but well, let's sum that up. Let's say there is basically 3 main types of visas that you usually are considering. There is a 6-month visa, there is a 6 to 12-month visa, and the 12+ month visa. They're all being called long-term visas. But the 6 month is like, they call it a temporary long term. Or, well, they could have called it a short term visa, but yeah, well, okay. So the 6 month visa is only 6 months in a row. It's not 6 months, all across the year. No, it's 6 months in a row. So that's not a visa we see often. It's usually very specific for kind of long-term holidays or something like that, or seasonal workers. But apart from that, it's usually not very suitable for second homeowners or retirees. But it does exist, and so it's the temporary long-term visa. And then there is the 6 to 12 month or the 12 plus month, actually are called exactly the same. These are the what they call the VLSTS. The 6 month is the VLST, and the 6 plus month, basically, the two of them, they are called VLSTS, which stands for Visa Long Séjour Valant Titre de Séjour. The difference between the 6 to 12 month and the 12 plus depends on what, actually they're exactly the same. The 6 to 12 is basically a visa where you probably want like a second homeowners type of visa. Again, depends on the situation. Sometimes it might be different, but that's usually a visa you'll use for second homeowners. And the 12 plus is one you'll use for residency, like when you want to move permanently. Okay. Again, there are exceptions, just to illustrate what I'm saying.
Okay, fab, thank you. And what would you say is the best visa for retirees?
Oh, by far and large, the visitor visa, which again, we picked up the right name to confuse you guys because it looks like it's a temporary visa or something. No, the visitor visa actually is a permanent visa, is a renewable visa. And I don't like the word renewable because usually when you're a retiree, you don't really renew the visa, you apply for a visa, and then you kind of convert it into a residency permit. So,
okay,
that's the visitor visa for retirees usually.
And if I want to work in France, is there a work visa?
Yeah, for once, this one we nailed it. It's like, name is this one, there's a work visa. But to get one, you need either a work contract, a French work contract, or a document, which actually is a standard document in France called the promesse d'embauche. But basically, you'll need formal, if you're coming to France to look for a job, that doesn't work. And actually, it's not possible to move to France looking for a job, or you'd have to apply for a visitor visa first and be like a tourist. And maybe you can update your plan and find a job, and then you'll declare that you're a worker. But it's not possible to come if you don't have, as a worker, again, if you don't have the contract yet, or kind of a commitment from a potential employer that they'll employ you. The only way you can do that is if you were a student with a student visa or kind of a student allowance to be in France, and then extend the visa using this motive, like, okay, I want to stay in France and find a job there. That's the only scenario where they can allow you to not have work and grant you a kind of a work visa. It's kind of specific. So.
Okay. And just quickly on this one, what are the key requirements for the French visas?
This is something I like to say. Well, simplify things as much as possible. First, you have to realize that basically we want you around, guys. It's just that France is part of the EU. Both France and the EU are very administrative entities, I would say. But at the end of the day, we do want you around. So the whole thing is not meant to kick you out of France or discourage you from coming. It's just made to make sure that you meet three main pillars of a relocation to France, which, well, technically they all make sense. And there is only one that's made to protect France. The first pillar is you need to have an address. Well, obviously, you need to have a safe place to live, because otherwise it's risky. That France doesn't want you to potentially be homeless or something. So you need to have an address in France. The second pillar is called the proof of income, but that could also be proof of savings. But basically, France wants to make sure you'll be able to afford living in France. So you need to meet France minimum wage, which, well, okay, I'll brag a bit. I know the exact figure is 1,398 euros net, but let's round that up to 1,400 a month. That's what you should be making as passive income, or times 12, and that's what you should have in savings and can even be a mix of both. Like if you only have half of the income, then you can top it up with half of the savings. Okay, and that's the second pillar. You need to be able to live in France, and there is an index for that. That's minimum wage, so you should meet that. I won't get into too much details, but that proof of income bit can vary. Obviously, if you're setting up a business, then we substitute the income with a business plan, and there works, but it's still the same pillar, and it's still kind of the same figures that I expect to see. And then the third pillar is proof of medical coverage, which very often means proof of medical insurance. But sometimes, if you're a retiree, for example, you might be eligible to something called an S1, and it's substitute, and the S1 will actually be the medical coverage. Or if you're Irish, I would say a real Irish, like you've paid towards the Irish social security system, well, then you're eligible to the EIC, which you used to have in the UK, like the European Health Insurance Card, which also would qualify. But the GIC does not work. It only works for the 6-month visa, by the way. So the third pillar is medical insurance, and that's to protect France this time. Like France wants to make sure, should anything happens to you, like you're being hit by a bus, well, you should be able to cover these expenses on your own until you're part of the French system, though, because you also will be able to join the French system usually within the first year.
Okay, fab. Thank you. I don't mean to keep saying fab. It's just
no, I'm fine with it. I mean, it means it's fabulous.
I'm just promoting the brand. Don't worry. Okay.
Keep on
okay. So, what documents? What are the required documents?
Okay. So, well, it does depend. It does depend on the type of visa you apply for, and it does depend if you're married or not. Well, then we getting quite specific. On average, the kind of documentation you'll require. So I'm considering, obviously, well, to keep things simple, I'm considering you're retired, or you'll be moving to France as a non-worker, retiree, for example, and you're alone. Okay, but again, it doesn't change much. But so just to simplify, so what you need: a passport, pictures, like passport compatible pictures. We've seen an application with someone who filed his application with a picture of himself on the beach. So just in case that needs to be said, but guys, that doesn't work. It's an official documentation. So official IDs, picture IDs, and you need 2 of them. When you are at the visa center, they'll have you write some letter. So again, it depends on what you're doing, considering retirement visa, so the non-working visa, they'll have you write a letter that you will not be working in France, or if you'll be working, they'll have you write a letter confirming what you'll be doing in France. You'll need, so this is a bit of a broad definition, but you'll need some evidence of your socio-economic situation, as they call it. So proof, basically, it's the proof of income or proof of savings. Okay. You'll need a certificate of insurance and proof of payment for this. You'll need something they call proof of accommodation. That could be either rental contract, the proof of purchase or ownership of a property, or an attestation d'hébergement, which is basically a letter from someone in France that says that has signed a sworn statement, saying that they're happy having you around. And yeah, that's actually pretty much it. Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously you need to file the form, the visa application form, but this one's kind of obvious.
Okay, lovely. Sorry. And tip 4, bring physical copies of your documents. I assume you mean to the physical interview at the embassy?
Yeah. So, well, that's what I was saying. Basically, it's you'll have to go through an in-person interview. And by the way, if that's 2 of you, that's 2 different interviews. It's just the children, like less than 16 years old, they don't have to go through individual interviews. But otherwise, everyone has to go through an interview. But that could be booked, consecutively, though. It's not a problem. But it has to be in the individual interviews, because they'll assess each files individually. Don't worry if you're a couple and this is a joint account, for example, and that's the same account, same proof of savings for both of you. It's completely fine. It's completely fine to use the same documents. but you'll still need to have a copy each. If you don't have that, so that's completely fine. Is that they just want you to bring the whole file with them, like the good old style paperwork based. I think France likes to be chopping down trees or whatever. We're not eco-friendly in that regard yet. But they'll review your documentation. Well, if you forgot, I don't know, to print, well, copy, for example, you need copies of your passport. Well, if you forgot to do that, they can do it at the visa center, but it's just that they'll charge for it. I think, well, it's just £1, but still they'll charge for it. Mm-hmm. So it's in your interest to do it. But again, they want you, in a way, they want you to make it across. So it's not like you forgot to print a copy of your passport and they'll send you back home saying, well, sorry, mate, we cannot process your file. No, well, they'll still be helpful. Just that obviously, well, they'll probably have to charge something in that regard. So yeah, so you do need to bring physical copies. But if you forgot, I've had the case like a couple of days ago. The guy came at the center, and when he printed, I think it was the proof of income, some of the bank statements. Actually, the printer kind of cut it before they could see the whole thing, the whole statement. So it was cut it a bit too. And it was too narrow in a way, and
yeah,
so they reprinted it there, and I think they charged him like a couple of pounds or something. So again, it's completely okay. It's just you're adding up delays and potentially that will cost you something, but that's fine.
Okay, lovely. Just on that, the interview at the embassy, does it have to be in person or can it be online?
No, it has to be in person. This one kind of makes, they want to make sure you're real, you're not pretending, and you're not filing an application on the behalf of someone else or whatever. It has to be a real person, and they want to see you. That's why they, and also during that interview, in a way, they review the documentation. That's their job. Nothing's missing there, and everything is compliant. They'll have a poker face though. Yeah, you could not tell whether you'll be accepted or not, which, at the end of the day, they're not the ones making the decision. That's what I'm saying. It's not really an interview. They're just reviewing the file with you, and because then they'll ship that to the consulate, and that's the consulate who takes the decision, who makes the decision, not them. So that's why they want to see you. But also, they basically will ask you, what's the plan, etc. So that they'll kind of confirm that whatever you've written matches whatever you're saying. But again, it's not like a line of questioning. It's just to confirm that you've done things properly, and then they send the whole thing to the consulate, and then you'll have your answer. Oh, quick tip though, because people sometimes don't realize, but they'll keep the originals of your passport for that application, because a visa is actually another page in your passport. So they'll keep the original of your passport. So if you have traveling plan in between, after your appointment, well, make sure you leave quite a bit of a buffer just in case, because you'll be passportless.
Lovely, thank you. We are getting an extreme amount of questions, so do not worry if we don't get back to you. They will all be forwarded to Fabian and his team, who will be able to get back to you in time. So let's pop on to the next one.
We'll do our best.
Okay, I think you kind of touched on this just now. So is it true that the passport is the only required document as proof of travel?
Yeah, well, like I was saying, this is France, and I think France like to be confusing. It's kind of a mind game we like playing. Yeah, I've seen this wording like proof of travel documentation, and I remember, I think up until 2021 or something, my memory might be a bit down, but they used to ask for plane tickets, ferry tickets, and things like that. So now what they call proof of travel documents is actually the passport. So, well, from a French perspective, apparently it's a travel document. So no, the proof of travel document is the passport.
It's the passport. Okay, fab, thank you.
But I'd be curious, try to use the passport with an airline and say, no, don't need plane tickets. This is my travel document. I'm not sure that works, but you can tell them. I don't know. The French consulate seems to say it's a travel document.
You can try.
Well,
as long as your pictures.
I'm interested.
Yeah. Try with the beach picture. Tip 6, prepare proof of accommodation documents. So what key requirements are there of those documents?
So, so basically, I touched base on this. Only three things that are. It needs to be a permanent accommodation. Airbnbs, Jeets, whatever hotels. They can work for short-term visas or stays or visas, but if you're applying for 6 to 12 months for 12 plus month visa, they don't work. So what they want to see here is either a copy of a 1-year contract. Don't be scared about this one. France only has that as an individual contract. It's either a short-term contract, like a seasonal renting or whatever, or an holiday let. But if you have a permanent contract, it's a 1-year contract. But it's the property owner who's committed for 1 year, not you as a tenant. The tenant can walk away within single month notice in France. So basically, you're not really committed, but they want to see, again, that you have a safe place to live for the next 12 months. That's what they want to see. So you need either a copy of a contract of a permanent rental agreement for 1 year, or something called the acte de vente authentique, which is proof of ownership of a French property. Quick tip as well on this one. When you're putting down an offer, this is usually a 90 days process to actually get the keys. You can only trigger, or schedule that interview once you have the keys. Because even if you've put down an offer, everything has been signed off, accepted, whatever, until you have the keys, the whole thing can still be cancelled. Well, for the first month, it can be cancelled for free, and afterwards with a fee. But still, up until the last minute, everything can be cancelled. So up until this point, you cannot use your soon-to-be yours property for the visa application. You need to have the acte de vente authentique, which you only have with the keys. And the third option is the one I've also mentioned, called the attestation d'hébergement, which actually you can download a template online for free on the official governmental website. They can generate the template for you, and you'll have the person, basically it's a person that's happy having you around or using their address, but you should be living there, basically, that's your address as well. But they'll sign this one statement saying, okay, we're happy to have you for the duration of your visa. So that's only one of these three documents that they'll accept.
Okay, fab, thank you. Sorry, I'm just replying to the questions that I can
Also,
answer.
you're super busy, and that's a superpower that you girls have, being able to do two things at the same time.
I know, I'm changing the screens as well. Okay, do you want to read this one?
Make sure you meet the income requirement for your visa type. Yeah, well, I've touched base on this one. So it could be income, as I was saying, minimum wage. So I've already mentioned the requirement, 1,400 a month net, because there's some people sometimes like, so the minimum wage in France is actually more than that. Yeah, that's the raw figure. So they want you to meet the net figure. And basically what they'll be looking for is the amount coming onto your bank account. So whatever it's raw, as long as you're receiving this amount of money, 1,400 euros or more, they'll be happy with. It can be in a foreign currency. They don't mind. It's just obviously then you'll have to consider currency exchange rate. Also, but the income, the savings, if you're going with savings, which often I would rather suggest, because obviously it's easier to prove savings, just a bank statement and that's it. They'll want to see the past 3 bank statements, but it's easy. Whereas income, you may have to produce more documentation. So if you can meet the requirements with the savings, that's easier. So just go with the savings. With savings, it needs to be cash. I don't know if the money is in premium bonds, for example, that doesn't exist in France. So that at the consulate, the guys at the visa center, they'll understand this. So they may be okay with that, and they'll take it and they'll send it to the consulate. But the guys at the consulate, they're probably French, though. The guys at the visa center, they'll be British, but the guys at the consulate may be French. And obviously I'm working in this industry, so I know. But I, as a French person, if I'm asking my friends, do you know what a premium bond is? They'll be like, what's this? You can play lottery with the state in the UK. So they wouldn't know. So that's something they would not accept. They need to understand what this is. And basically, I want to see that you have savings in a saving account or a saving plan or whatever that's instantly available. So whatever you're showing them, usually I would strongly advise have the money on a checking account or something like that. It's instantly available. But it could be something else, as long as they can understand it. Because I've seen application being denied because they've sent something that, well, even from my perspective, I don't know if it's sitting on an ISA, for example, that doesn't exist in France.
Okay.
So you're taking a risk there. So again, sometimes some people slip through the cracks, but I would strongly suggest checking accounts.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Tip number 8, organise your health insurance. So
Obviously,
no, go ahead.
yeah, no, obviously I'll say we're the best because we've been battle testing our policies for years now and have pretty much 100% success rate. We've seen some rejections, not with our plan though, but sometimes a visa gets denied because maybe you did something wrong with your application, or maybe you're not meeting other requirements. So our policies all come with 100% money back guarantee should the visa be denied, so that you're buying with peace of mind. And we also guarantee we have the cheapest policy that meets the visa requirements. So, well, should you find a cheaper plan, we refund the difference. So we've tried to make this as simple as Frenchly possible so that it's a no-brainer to come work with us. But you can work with anyone as long as they meet the requirements. And I think these are some of the questions you'll be asking, like, what are those requirements?
Yeah, that is indeed my next question.
Okay. The theoretical requirements are supposedly the same all across the planet, but there are some nuances. But let's say you're supposed to have 30,000 euros medical coverage per person and per year. In an outpatient benefit, repatriation should be included. No excess deductible, copay, co-insurance, whatever the wording you're using, wherever you are. Basically, it should be from what the French would call from the first euro. And as I was saying, you also need to have, it's not really a requirement, but you need to show that you've paid for the policy. They require the proof of payment of the policy. Mm-hmm. And the policy should cover the whole duration of the visa. So they want to see a start date and an end date or renewal date that lapses all over the duration of the visa. Or if it doesn't, they want to see, let's say the visa is supposed to be starting on the 1st of July, but your policy started on the 1st of April, then it should, to make sure it's compliant, your certificate of insurance should mention policy automatically renewed, at, expiry date or whatever the wording, but it should be said and, plainly. Okay. And no medical exclusions should be mentioned. Sorry, I forgot to say this.
Okay, that's handy to know. Make sure you activate your long-term visa. What does this mean?
Yeah, that's French specific. And if I'm being honest, it's just a way that they came up with to charge you an extra 200 euros, guys. Sorry about that. But it also enables a few perks. So basically, within the first 90 days, you should activate your visa. So you can do that online. You don't have to go anywhere. It's something you do on your own. If there are some kind of glitches, or if it's not working, don't assume it went through unless you've received an official confirmation that it's okay and activated. It probably isn't. Okay, I'm saying this because sometimes the website, I know, is buggy, so don't assume it went through or it's right. No, unless they actually confirmed it's right, it's probably not. But once the visa has been activated, you can convert your driver license. So, for example, if you're from the US, then that's from the activation date of your visa that you can convert the license. You don't have to wait longer. You can actually start very quickly. You can activate the visa just the day after you moved. You arrived in France, you can activate it the day after tomorrow. So, but there is also another perk. Well, it's not a real perk, but people have there is a lot of fear mongering about the medical appointment, because after you've activated your visa, you'll be offered an in-person medical appointment as well. So again, well, fear not. This is not to say maybe you are in a bad shape or maybe you have conditions and whatever, and then we'll send you back. It's actually to make sure that you understand. Well, they'll also explain things like, well, you can enter the French social security system if you have disabilities or things like that, they'll tell you you may be eligible to something called the ALD status in France, which will improve the cover. And also, it's important for French statistics. But basically, what they want to see in that appointment is that you're not coming to France with rabies or some kind of contagious disease. And it's actually that, they run you through an X-ray to make sure that you don't have, I don't have the English wording for that, but a condition that's in the lung. That's basically it. They want to make sure that you don't have some kind of contagious disease and you are up to date with your vaccinations, just in case, because I know it's kind of a topic. They don't check for COVID vaccinations, just like the mandatory vaccinations in France, which are pretty much the same as in the UK. So you're safe with that. Never seen anyone having a problem with these medical appointments. So.
Okay, lovely.
Unless you have
I've
rabies.
yeah. I've just switched on to the last tip, as you mentioned social security and entitlements. So once you get to France on your visa, can you register with the public healthcare system?
Yes, actually, if you if you intend to spend 183 days or more, basically become a French permanent resident and taxpayer, you will have to be part of the French social security system. Again, some exemptions with detached workers and, well, long story short, yes, you'll have to. So yes, you will become eligible, but also it's kind of a mandatory requirement. And most of the time it involves an application with so the French system is called CPAM, which is the equivalent of the NHS in the UK, pretty much. And usually you have to apply through something called PUMA, Protection Universelle Maladie, which literally means healthcare cover for everyone.
Lovely. Thank you.
And most of the time this is approved from the UK. US expats, depending on how much you're making, you may have to pay something. But again, it's very, very low, I would say, in contrast to the income. It's always in relation to the income there.
Okay, definitely. Thank you so much. That's some great tips there. We have had almost 100 questions, so I will whiz through as many as I can now, as we do have a little bit more time. I've just found one from Peter. He's been quoted by Mondial First for insurance, and they're stating categorically that Schengen travel insurance is fine for visa applications. Is this true, as they're in no excess and covers repatriation?
So this policy is ours, and we've indeed negotiated special agreements and special exemptions in a particular case, which are exclusive to a company. So yes, it does cover people living in France as a permanent resident with no excess. Well, basically meets the requirement. Yes.
Okay, fab. I know a lot of our viewers have heard about the potential second home visa that was rejected. Have we had any more progress on this?
Well, there are good and bad news. So the good news is, I think for me, it shows that France really is trying to help British investors, expats, or even long-term tourists, so look into France or move to France, because we did try to create this regulation. The bad news is it's been rejected indeed, but it's not. I mean, again, it's also a good news because it's not. It hasn't been rejected by the state, actually. It's been rejected by the Conseil constitutionnel, and basically in regard to some EU regulations that consider that favoring the Brits in a way is discriminatory, because why not everyone? So for that particular reason, as they see this as discriminatory, I don't think that there is any way that I can reintroduce the bill because, well, by definition, they consider it to be discriminatory. However, the bare fact that the bill was there in the first place shows that, they're trying to help you guys make it to France. So it shows that France doesn't hold a grudge for Brexit, or actually is happy having you around. Maybe the EU holds a bit of a grudge, but not us. So you're welcome.
Okay, lovely. We have had a question from David. I was just trying to answer this, but I decided it was too complicated and I'd let you answer it. So I'll just read it. As a non-EU citizen, for how long can long-stay visas be extended while I maintain tax residency elsewhere?
So
So
what was the beginning of the question? I've been, what was it?
he's a non-EU citizen,
Yeah.
and I believe he wants to live in France, but also wants to maintain tax residency elsewhere.
No. Okay. So unfortunately, this is not a thing you can decide on. It's either you live more than 183 days in France and you are a tax resident in France, or you live elsewhere and you're a tax resident elsewhere. So that, just to clear the topic out. And again, you can really extend a visa. Extension of a visa is something done at the prefecture in France when, for example, you go there to apply for residency permits and you don't yet have a French social security number, and they're not happy with that because the government basically, and well, you're supposed to be okay. I mean, but if they don't want you, and then they'll tell you, okay, we'll extend your visa an extra 3 months, and then come back in 3 months with your social security number, which you can apply for an emergency social security number as well, but it's a different topic. So, so extension, that's not really a word I'd be using. Again, you can renew a visa, which means you're coming back to your home country, you reapply for a visa, and then you renew the visa, or you apply for a residency permit in France. Okay, so if you apply for residency permits, well, then you're a tax resident. So there's no question here. If you just have that 12-month visa and you renew them because you're just like a long-term tourist in France and you keep on renewing visas, then yes, if you don't spend more than 183 days in France, then you can be a foreign tax resident and be less than 6 months basically in France. So I don't know if that answers the question, but hopefully it does.
Yeah, that makes more sense to me. Thank you. Barbara's asking, if I have a holiday home in France and visit only under the 90-day rule, does the time frame of a 30 to 90 days still apply for a long-term visa?
Yeah, but it works one way, not both ways. So I'll explain. You can come to France within the 90 days allowance, apply actually for your visa from France because it's a website. Okay, schedule for the interview, move back to let's say the UK, it could be the US, whatever. Move back to the UK in my example. Go through the interview. Obviously, they'll keep your passport, so you wait there. And if you're accepted, then move back to France. It's completely doable. It's not doable the other way around. If you had a 6-month visa, for example, at the expiry of your visa, some people are like, okay, so now I have the 90 days allowance. No, because it's 90 days every 180 days, and this rule works backwards. So basically, when the visa expires, the day after, they'll look at the past 180 days, and if you've been in France for 90 days or more, you're not allowed to come to France. Or actually in the Schengen area, because it's not just France. Okay, so the fact that you had a visa or not is irrelevant for that allowance.
Okay. So applying for the visa, I'm aware you apply via your local French embassy. So it's whatever country that you're applying from, it's the French embassy in your country, right?
Embassy or consulate. In the UK, US, that would be the consulate, and and again, in big countries, when I'm saying big, it's mostly in terms of number of people moving to France. They subcontract this to a private contractor. So in the UK, that's TLS and TLS Contact, and in the US, that's VFS Global. And in Canada, that's VFS Global as well. In Australia, that's VFS Global as well, just for example. But I don't know, if you're in India, that's the consulate.
Yeah.
So it depends. But at the end of the day, they all ship the passports, well, actually, sorry, the file, the visa application to the consulate, who will process it and send it back to the contractor.
With that in mind, ZJ's asked, if you're an American in the UK legally for 6 months, can you apply from the UK?
Yes, very good question. You can apply either in the country of residency or citizenship. And that works if you have multiple citizenship. So let's say in her case, even if she had dual nationalities, she could, let's say, so she's also, I don't know, Indian, Well, she could apply either in India or in the US or in the UK, because she's also living in the UK. So you can apply residency country and nationality or nationalities countries for country.
Thank you. Anthony's asking if purchasing a house was dependent if purchasing a house was dependent on obtaining a visa/residence permit, can you get an idea whether you'd be successful in advance of doing this?
So I would say it works the other way around. This is a very, very, very frequent question. So this is something you can add as, we would say, a clause suspensive in your when you're putting down an offer. You can add this as a clause suspensive. Say, okay, we're buying the house with the condition that should we not get the visa, we can cancel it, or we can, backtrack on the application. So that's doable, but not necessary, because again, boils down to the 3 pillars. And medical insurance, you just need to buy it. So it's just a question. Well, you can contact us. We'll provide you with a quote. Can you afford it or not? It's basically that. So well, this is very easy. Income or savings, same. Well, do you have the money or not? Do you have the savings? Yes or not? So these 2 things, it's very, straight now, you can know whatever you meet the requirements or not. So it's just about the address. And in that particular context and question, well, the address, you'll have it because you're buying one. So basically, you meet the 3 pillars.
Okay.
I think it answers the question.
Yeah, you're good. Thank you. We still have so many questions coming in, so don't worry. We will forward all of these to Fabian and his team at Fab. You can also scan the QR code just up there. Let me just make it bigger for you, and then you'll be able to book an appointment with Fabian.
Yeah, I'll just a quick thing about that. Unfortunately, I'm a bit more popular than expected. So I do offer free consultation and free consultations, which you can get through that QR code. Well, obviously, the one that are fastest to book an appointment may have more options. But if you think that the dates that are offered are too far in the future, you can also, there is a link in the booking to book a VIP consultation. So unfortunately, this one is a paid consultation, but we'll offer more options. So you can have a free consultation, no problem, but maybe the time flexibility might not be ideal. Or if you're in a hurry, then you can book a VIP consultation. And also in regard to all of the questions that have been asked, as soon as the Yo team can forward us the questions, we'll try to answer each and every one of you as quickly as we can. Bear with us, guys, because I know there's been a lot of questions, so I do appreciate that, and we'll work as efficiently as Frenchly possible.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely true. Thank you. Just a quick one to end on. People looking to move to France, let's say, actually, let me phrase this right. When is the best time to get in touch with you, basically, in terms of how far out from wanting to move to France?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. The ideal time frame is 6 to 3 months prior to the intended arrival date. And this is something I've not emphasized, but basically, you need to have kind of a fixed date in mind, because until you have that, or you can have that, it's not really real. Like you need to, Q4 2024 is not a date. And because from that date, like 1st of September is the date, and then we can work things backwards and from that date. So that being said, yeah, 6 months-ish, 6 to 3 months prior to the date is the ideal scenario. Obviously, if you're 2 months ahead, then reach out as quickly as possible because you are in a hurry. If you're more than 6 months ahead, that's great. You're a bit in advance. That's cool. I would just say more than 1 year in advance might be a bit too soon, though, simply because also bear in mind that everything I'm saying could be wrong tomorrow, because things keep on changing. This is an ever-evolving industry and field. This is kind of highly political as well. So, well, this is good to get some information early on, but don't get too much or too precise of an information, because again, maybe you'll be disappointed if they change actually the rules and it's no longer relevant. So usually within 6 months, we don't anticipate, because even if they vote new things or there are new developments, it's highly unlikely that they'll apply something within such a short time frame. We've seen it though, but it's highly unlikely. But yeah, so the ideal time frame, I would say, it's 6 months plus or minus 3 months.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much, Fabian. Some really insightful tips and advice there. We do strongly recommend to all of our viewers to get in touch with Fab Insurance directly to discuss your requirements in detail, and we'll be in touch with their details shortly. You'll be getting an email tomorrow. Alternatively, you can book a consultation just by scanning there.
Somewhere.
Yeah, it's somewhere around here. If you've enjoyed this webinar and found Fabian's tips useful, we'd really appreciate it if you could spare 2 minutes to leave us a review on Trustpilot. It should have just popped up on your screen. Thanks again, Fabian. I know we definitely ran over there, but you're just so popular.
Well, thank you for having
Thanks.
me, and thank you guys for being for joining us today. Hopefully, it's been a fabulous webinar, and I'll be happy to answer each and every of your questions over time, again, as quickly as we can.
Lovely, thank you. And to all of our viewers, good luck with your French visa applications, and we hope to see you at our next webinar for buyers in France. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks for having me.